Hey, to Korea, the straight up, and here we are again, having a conversation, having candid one at best as we can, being honest, and interrogating things that come across our pages, our X platforms, which I found a very interesting X comment from a coach from South Carolina, Rita Gary. Before I get to Rita Gary, the coach of cross-country distance running program in South Carolina, let me be honest about my YouTube channel that I've allowed myself to have a conversation with my audience. I try to look at the balance. There's always nuances, there's always that. But I allow the benevolence of it all to play out, if that is possible. Let the truth just play out. So let's go to 2016, where there was a challenge that was put out by a Polish 800-meter runner that was relegated to fifth place in the final, and the winners were women from African descent. And she had the audacity and the gall and the boldness to say that the competition in the 800 meters in the final were not women, but men. And the undertone on that comment was nothing but racism, targeting women of color from Africa in particular, because it was South Africa, Burundi, and Kenya. I have said this several times, I keep repeating myself. There's always something you have to hear and hear it carefully. And then Lord Sebastian Coe took it to another level, where there's this idea of purifying the sport. And purifying the sport is in the context of saying the litmus test is Eurocentric, beauty and women. Femininity has to be seen from that perspective. So anybody with a muscle or a gender that doesn't look very blonde and skinny and Eurocentric, even when the face value is not woman enough. So I've dug into that subject. It's still going to be part of our narrative moving forward in sports. Here's another one from Rita Gary, the coach at Foreman College or University in South Carolina. She wrote this. I quote her from the X platform. She said this without, filtering herself. I don't know, she kind of paraphrased. I'll read verbatim a little bit so we can have a conversation. She said, let me be clear. Okay, she's trying to start with that. I always wonder why somebody has to say, let me be clear. Why do you have to say, let me be clear? This is Rita Gary. She said, let me be clear. I fully support coaches who personally recruit international athletes with integrity. Invest in them, develop them, and help build a better long-term future. She continues, diversity makes our sport better. But buying wins isn't coaching and is costing us. Okay, there she says in X. And then she wonders in the next one. She continues in another X that she wrote out there. NCAA coaches are paying $60,000 to agents for athletes from economically vulnerable countries flagged by the Agency of Water for systematic doping. These transactions are partly, she puts in bold, partly, instead of, I think she should have said partly funded by US tax dollars, she continues. And then here is where it gets interesting for me as a Kenyan born American resident or citizen right now. She says this, she quickly goes and says, artists like Ngao of TCU and Cheptanui of Tulane University competed in NCAA despite active doping suspensions. Did I tell you something here that, okay, and then she continues, this is where it gets interesting for me. She says one thing, I'll just giving you guys something to chew on if you can do this. She says, the fallout, now she has this bold statement, is not development. She started by saying it was development for a long time, but now she says it's not development, it's athlete trafficking. These athletes are treated like short-term investments. Meanwhile, clean athletes lose out. Who are the ones losing out? And scarce scholarship roster opportunities are pulled from U.S. high school schoolers. I believe we can do better. Gary, I'll tell you this. I read things and I try to follow their logic as much as I've shared that with you. She starts well by saying, let me be clear. What is clear to me is what I call patriotism. Patriotism is a refuge of a scoundrel. It's a quote that was said back then. What she's saying here has all the undertones of discriminative narrative. It has racism just buried in that. I want to be clear. And then she goes to Kenya and targets Kenya in particular when it comes to distance running. I can see that. And she talks of agents being paid so much to recruit these athletes, almost like she calls it athletes trafficking. You know, I came to this country on a scholarship, Division One, UL, Lafayette. It was an opportunity. I did very well, went to nationals, proudly so, brought a lot of points in our conference. We won our first indoor conference in 1991 in my freshman year. I anchored the 4x8 to champion. We won by 2 points. I'm from Kenya. Distance runner, 800. I ran all the way to 3,000. Maybe cross country, I was good. In fact, I was good. I'm talking about myself. Rita Gary, the coach from Foreman, seems to think Kenyans and people from poor national countries don't belong in Division One. I'm disagreeing with that, you can tell, because I think for her, she's echoing the sentiments of the present age landscape of America. Anti-immigrant, very racist to say the least, because you can tell it's all Kenya, Africa. I talked about a Polish woman talking of these women are not really women enough, they don't belong in the sport. There's this idea that there's a filtering that is being promulgated or pontificated by this woman and the Polish woman. These people don't belong here. And for me, there's an innocence to their narrative. They act, it's masqueraded by this innocence. Let me be clear. Let me tell you what I think. I think I find it problematic because behind that innocence, behind this idea of that, let me be clear, is I think there's this idea of telling us these people, these immigrants, should be deported. They don't belong here. And then she talks of developing high schoolers. She's talking of local. Great. Let them be developed. I'm a big fan. I've coached in high schools. Let them go to college if they're good enough. But the beauty of America is not how you can do that. It's how big America has become and great has become, because back in the 70s, the 80s, there was a pipeline. They called it a pipeline. That makes it even interesting that there's a book that was written about pipeline of African distance runners from Kenya in particular that came to this country. I'm talking of the late Henry Rono, Mike Boit, Paul Ranks, big names, Julius Karaoke, gold medalist in '88 and all that. That's what makes America great. The openness, the competitiveness, the internationality, the global perspective of athletics. And when it comes to distance running, it's the story, and I've talked about Kenya in particular, because Ethiopia doesn't seem to bring a lot of their athletes to college here in America. I don't know how that is because of the schooling system. But I think Rita Gary, to me, is echoing the present narrative and the sentiments of some Americans, and it's predominantly people from these areas that have a bent and a bias towards people from different diverse. She talks about diversity in a very interesting way. I think is a cover-up for what she's really trying to say. For me, when she says diversity, what do you mean by diversity if all you can see is the locale, the backyard? I think colleges in this country are as great as when they are open. And I see where she's struggling too, maybe, because NCAA and then new laws are coming into place on shrinking the roster and the funding in sports is making coaches like Rita Gary restless. And they are saying, who has priority in this funding? Who has priority in these scholarships? Is it a Kenyan athlete like the Doris Lemgole, the Alabama steeplechaser who obliterated the competition steeplechase nationals? Is it Coach Gay, New Mexico, who can go win 5K and 10K? I think that's what she's trying to say. This means this idea of who deserves that meal on the table in scholarship. Uh, I think it is an interesting conversation, but I think it's masqueraded too with racism and anti-immigration and anti-international students, because when the funding shrinks, in the colleges are not going to give enough scholarship to go across the schools and different potential athletes from high school here and maybe locally. They are trying to say, how come Doris Lemgole can get scholarship from Kenya, full scholarship? I think that is where the fight is, but I think the fight should be on integrity and merits, and instead of masquerading it by saying that let's just focus on within. Because for me, as an international, and I've become an American over the years, it speaks to this patriotism that is being played out, but behind it is something else. Yes, I can see why there's a who deserves this more. And I think one of the things she's struggling with, and I think I read an article she talks about, is values. She's talking of ethics. Yet when you think of every program in America, everybody is buying, so to speak. You have to recruit. And recruiting is a challenge maybe to somebody like her because maybe she doesn't have international connections. But I think for her to say there's US taxes being used in this process of recruiting, that's an overreach. I think that to me is as blasphemous, if I may say it's ludicrous, because I think most of the athletes who have done well, like some of us, we went through the due process. NCAA clearance house as a process. People have to check in. You have to pass English. You have to pass certain tests. You have to have the capacity to come and compete. If somebody can win 5,000 in the national level and 10,000, and you are still saying they don't belong in Division 1, that is 20 points for a school. Any school will go for that athlete. And I think she needs to figure out how can an athlete, and she's predominantly women coach, and I think she can do better and focus on bringing the best out of her instead of looking around and says there's unfairness. The world is never fair, my friend. It's never fair. Competition is never fair. There's always somebody's going to have an edge. Somebody's going to lean in. Somebody's going to be training better than you. Somebody has better DNA. Somebody grew up poor, so they are more hungrier. If you have a lazy group of athletes in your program, Rita Gary, you don't want to put in the miles. They don't want to put in the work. They don't wake up and do extra. NCAA and the championship national level will be something you'll be whining and bickering and saying, you're not. I think I'm tired when you hear people feel they're entitled because they're American. You have to work harder. Just the lanes are 8 lanes, cross country is an open field. If you're ahead, you're ahead. You don't have to be ahead just because you can. Even Kenyans, not everybody from Kenya wins. We have some athletes who've come to this country, they've struggled even to make the cut because maybe you're right, maybe they cheated in their papers, maybe they didn't belong, but you'll be exposed anyway. So I think merits counts, potential counts, hard work counts. But to masquerade your tweets and your X stuff by saying all this that you're a pure coach, to me, it's you are hiding behind those statements, because I can tell you right now, what I'm reading here is a bunch of somebody who is trying to sound pure and ethically righteous. But if you look at their resume, maybe there's some dead stuff in your closet. So I'm not advocating cheating. I'm not advocating cutting shortcut. Some of us put in the work. Some of us go the extra mile. Kenyans work hard. They train like donkeys to make it. They know if they don't train, they don't get it. So this idea that they are cheating, they are dopers, yeah, they are there. Don't get me wrong. Cheptanui cheated. If they were cheating, they were cheating. And they were busted in Kenya. How they got here, NCAA clearing them out, I have no idea. There's some people who cheat. America have cheaters. There's been college athletes whom I remember in my days who are using steroids. I know steroid is part of the game. People want to get an edge. But to target people from African descent, they're not women enough. They have agents who are paying $60,000 to get them here. That is not the whole story. The story of Kenyans is that they train hard, they work hard, and when they come here, they are the Doris Lemgole of Alabama, who smiles at the end of the race and say, "I've worked hard, I deserve this. Shut the hell up. I'm celebrating it." Personally, she should go professional. Rita can coach her high schoolers. She should earn her money in professional level. That's my advocacy, because I think the great thing about Division One school, the great thing about NCAA is that you can go to Olympics. You can go if you're doing very well, you can go to Olympics. You can go and be professional. This idea of keeping it like it's high school is not. You have to make money, and money sometimes can be shrinking. The funding can be a problem. But doesn't mean those people who have merits, who have potential, don't belong there, including Kenyans who've worked hard. Historically, Kenyans come to this country, they work their butts off. So you can see I'm passionate because that's how I got here. Rita Gary, work harder, coach. Stop thinking somebody's taking away from your plate. Your plate might just be empty. So work harder, stop thinking Kenyans are taking anything from you. Not even US tax money. Not even go there. It's trying to sound patriotic. Patriotism can be a refuge of scoundrel. I think somebody was right. She could be hiding and masquerading her statements. Not a big fan. Go Kenya, go international, go NCAA. That was me. Tuko Riada, my friend. Lamentations. I'm speaking from the mountain top.